One of my favorite parts of every game in the Danganronpa series has to be their intro cutscenes. These are basically the little sequences that play towards the start of each game and show off all the characters. Even though they aren't really too important to the overall experience, I've always really loved these intros. So today, I thought it would be fun to rank each of the intro cutscenes across the Danganronpa games. Now, what exactly are we ranking these intros by? Well, I'd say their main purpose is to get the player hyped for the game they're playing. How good a job of this each of these openings do is obviously going to depend on the person, but for me, my main criteria is this. It's gotta look good, it's gotta sound good, and you gotta feel it in your chest. Things like narrative relevance and symbolism will also be factored in, but really, this is mostly just about how I personally think and feel about them. Also, just to be clear, no, I won't be including the blast-off execution from Danganronpa 1. Even though it's arguably pretty similar, I kinda consider it something different, and I'm not sure how I'd compare it to the rest of these. Also, I would love to include the theme songs from the DR animes in this ranking, but they're so freaking copyrighted and it's impossible to show any footage of the anime opening. But anyway, with all that said, let's get started with our last place. Coming from the guy that'll defend Ultra Despair Girls till the day he dies, this intro is not that great. If I were to describe this opening in one word, it would really just have to be underwhelming. While not bad, every other intro just makes such more creative use of editing and music that it ends up leaving this one to feel pretty lame in comparison. First off, this version of the Danganronpa leitmotif is easily the worst and most boring. It doesn't really do much to stand out from the other versions of the song. It really just feels like the original version, but more boring. I never really understood how they made this song feel like it's doing less than the original. The other versions of this leitmotif have their own distinct style and identity that really work to their benefit, but this one's identity is just kind of being the most basic and uninspired version of the theme we've heard. The editing really doesn't make much creative use of clips from the game. Most of the scenes feel very static, they feel like there isn't much going on visually. And most of the scenes that do have more movement still end up coming off as more cringe than visually interesting, thanks in no small part to the game's unpolished and stilted 3D animation and character models. This whole intro cutscene really just feels like a tonal mess from start to finish. It's so strange how it seems like they tried to tone down the zany editing and creative energy that most of these intros are all about, especially because this is Ultra Despair Girls, arguably the weirdest, craziest, and most out-of-the-box entry in the entire franchise. This is the one with the intro that just feels slow and tedious. Like I said earlier, I still can't say it's bad, it's never a pain to watch, it just honestly could have been a lot more. Danganronpa V3's opening cutscene is a pretty different case, because instead of being composed of clips from its own game, it's more like a retrospective of the previous games and animes of the series. This is an introduction that has a very distinct purpose, as it works not only to set the stage for V3, but also takes the players on a nostalgia trip through their past experiences with the franchise. The music starts out mostly reminiscent of Danganronpa 1's opening theme, as it quickly teases a bunch of clips from the most memorable moments of the series. This build-up is pretty much perfectly executed, with the footage becoming increasingly erratic and fast-paced in tandem with the music. By the way, I really like how the beat drop is perfectly timed with Monokuma hitting the punishment time button. This is where the intro really starts to pick up the pace. We very quickly go through a few Trigger Happy Havoc clips before seamlessly transitioning from the Danganronpa 1 intro theme to the hard rock electric guitar intro theme from Danganronpa 2, as it begins to run through some clips from that game. After this, it moves on to Ultra Despair Girls, then Danganronpa 3. But then there's the ending. A hard cut to black followed by the words, "This story is not over," with blood red text. As we see a close-up shot of Monokuma laughing, we're slowly revealed parts of the characters of Danganronpa V3. And the text soon comes to say, "A new killing game will begin again," before fading to black as the camera moves away. This is one of the hardest going moments in the series. Everything about this scene is perfect, from the cinematography, the sound design, to the fact that it actually looks like an in-universe teaser for Danganronpa V3 when you consider the game's ending twist. Overall, this whole opening cutscene is pretty great all things considered. The only thing holding it back is the fact that it just doesn't have too much we haven't seen before. The music and shots are pretty much entirely reused from earlier entries in the series, meaning that pretty much every other intro has the advantage. But ultimately, this intro still definitely does what it sets out to do. Danganronpa 2's first opening, Dangan Island, Panic at the Heart-Throbbing School Trip, or as I usually just call it, the game's false opening. I've honestly always really liked this one, just because of its fun energy. This opening has a couple of purposes. One, to really hammer home the confusion and unpredictability of the situation you and the characters have found yourself in. And two, establish the vastly different atmosphere that DR2 has in comparison to DR1. Considering the placement in the story, this sequence plays after all the characters have been introduced to Usami and seemingly magically transported from Hope's Peak Academy to a tropical island. This is such a bizarre scenario, setting, and tone, especially compared to the relatively grounded prologue of Danganronpa 1. And all this weirdness is just cemented when it's followed up by this strangely cheery intro cutscene. It's more akin to a traditional anime opening than something from a main series DR game. And not to mention, it's another one that just fits into the story really organically, considering the game's ending twist relating to the virtual world. See, one of the big themes in Danganronpa 2 is this concept of not just hope or despair, but false hope. This idea that no matter how well everything seems to be going now, no matter how much everyone seems to be getting along, no matter how much everyone thinks the worst is behind them, there's always that feeling that everything could be torn away from you in a moment. You want everyone to stay happy and hopeful, but deep down you know that's not going to be the case, and whatever hope you build will inevitably come crashing down on you. This is what I consider one of the best parts of Goodbye Despair's identity, and this theme of false hope is just set up perfectly with this false intro. It's so exaggerated that you know it has to be trolling you. You know what series this is. You're just waiting to understand what kind of game they're playing. And that's what makes the entirety of Goodbye Despair's beginning so interesting to me. Aside from the strange way you showed up, nothing about this atmosphere is immediately creepy or wrong, and because of that, everything seems wrong. And on top of all that, it's just really fun. Like, forget the tone and atmosphere and story and stuff, this is just really pleasant to watch. The music is so catchy, the colors and the way the characters pop up is so fun, and it's just really nice to see all of them so happy. The original Danganronpa opening is a classic in every sense of the word. The main thing I love about the first few cutscene sequences of this game, like Blast Off and this opening, is how perfectly it establishes the tone of the entire series. It's weird, dark, mysterious, kind of creepy. The build-up to this entire sequence is flawless. It starts out slowly, then the music progressively rises and build up for the beat drop. The music gets faster and more complex up until we finally get that iconic, and this intro can really get started. The combination of that catchy, unforgettable leitmotif with the frantic, stylized visuals immediately draws you in. It's vibrant, energetic, and it just has such raw intensity that makes it stand out even years after its release. And the vocal samples in the music are beautiful and fit the atmosphere perfectly. And then the way it introduces each character with such flair is done perfectly. The quick cuts, the dynamic framing, the overlays, the beautiful character illustrations, and of course we can't forget about the fact that it unapologetically kinda spoils a few character deaths. But I've never had a problem with it because nobody noticed it on their first playthrough, and all it does is make the intro more memorable and fun on replays. Every rise and fall of the music's tone is perfectly synchronized with the visuals. The smooth transitions, the perfect pacing, and the crazy, unforgettable editing style. It's so over the top in the best way possible. This was the perfect setup for not only this game, but the entire franchise, and it creates such a perfect template and formula for the future game intros to follow. If the false opening was a playful misdirection, the true opening of Danganronpa 2 is a full-throttle dive into the spirit of this game. The music alone makes it clear right away what this game is. The slow start is very similar to the original Danganronpa theme, but as soon as you hear that electric guitar riff, things really pick up. This remix of the original theme now as a rock song clearly communicates this isn't just a cheap, cash grab, asset reusing sequel. This is Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair. It's bigger, flashier, and masterfully expands on the themes and stories of the original game. Even visually speaking, this opening feels like a perfect progression from the first game. This time, instead of the characters just kind of floating out in nowhere, each character gets their own unique background to fit their talents or personalities. And instead of looking like they're posing for a picture, their facial expressions look more serious and concerned. The coloration isn't nearly as bright as the original, but instead, it's more desaturated and monochromatic in a way that absolutely works to its benefit. It establishes a more serious tone and makes every character stand out even more. And then there's the editing. The shots are so much more dynamic, the transitions are so fluid and satisfying, everything goes at such a fast pace, it feels like nothing ever stops moving. It's just basically perfect in every single way. DR2's intro feels like the ultimate, definitive version of intros in this series. Or at least it would, if it weren't for one other. Yeah, I think we all knew this was coming. Danganronpa V3 has easily the best intro cutscene and outdoes every other intro before it in basically every way. What this intro really conveys is, this is what Danganronpa looks like with a budget behind it. And indeed, every aspect of the intro reflects this sentiment. As expected from V3, all the characters and artwork looks amazing. It feels like a truly modern take on the classic Danganronpa formula. And what makes this opening so perfect is how both in-universe and in real life, it has a very distinct primary idea that's integral to its entire spirit. Both in the V3 world and in our real world, Danganronpa has grown a lot as a series since Danganronpa 2 in terms of success and popularity. It's become a franchise with spin-offs and animes and degenerates and mangas, and has just overall become more culturally significant. V3 was a return to the classic DR formula after quite a while of a departure. And of course, in-universe, Danganronpa is a world-famous TV show in this game. It's a fitting tribute to the legacy of the series, while also working perfectly to set the tone for this entry. Instead of what most intros do, having a slow beginning that progressively builds up faster and faster before getting to the Danganronpa voice sample and the beat drop, V3 starts us off immediately into the chorus. As if to say, come on guys, let's cut some of the fluff. We're a franchise, we all know how this goes by now, let's just get straight into the action. The song is a chill, jazzy version of the classic DR leitmotif that gives this intro such a cool and casual flair to it. The smooth jazzy theme is a very refreshing twist to the familiar song, and it just gives off such a sophisticated and classy and very confident vibe. I remember seeing this intro for the very first time and distinctly going, oh yeah, now this is what an HD Danganronpa game looks like. V3 in general really just looks like the whole series making the jump to an HD console. Every single frame of this intro I want to print out and put on my wall. Everything just looks so polished and refined. The leap in visual fidelity is just very clear, with everything bursting with gorgeous art design and intricate details. And the characters of course give off so much personality thanks to the detail in their illustrations. The camera movement is so beautiful and smooth, it glides effortlessly between every scene and character. The cinematography is just masterfully done. Each character, their shadow, and their name card just slide onto the screen with such buttery smoothness, and I can't get over the way each of their props subtly move independently of them instead of being fixed to their sprite. The way this detail is used makes everyone feel so much more alive, and it adds so much to the overall cinematography and flow, like having Ryoma's tennis ball fly towards the screen, or having it look like Himiko's just released a bunch of magic props from her cape. Same with the dark, shadowy silhouette behind each of the characters. First off, it's a really cool in-game reference to the silhouette guy that appears in closing arguments as the culprit, but also it just works to create an amazing sense of depth. In tandem with the character props, it gives this appearance like these aren't just 2D illustrations, but are actually existing in a 3D space. It's also not at all afraid of showing off original artwork and animations for this opening, instead of just relying on clips from the game. It has a lot of awesome unique artwork, and the shots exclusive to this intro actually end up being some of the coolest in the game. And the way that the music perfectly syncs up with every movement and scene change is just so satisfying. The animation style in general is just so satisfying. It feels so snappy and fluid. I could honestly go on for an hour about this opening, going frame by frame about how everything is so perfectly executed, but I have to stop at some point. I think you get the idea though. Danganronpa V3's intro cutscene is easily the best in the series, and I really don't see how any other could come close to it. Thank you for watching, and if you're a passionate defender of the Ultra Despair Girls opening and are mad that I didn't put it higher, leave an angry comment. But for now, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.